Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined today by Mark Finkelstein, who is the Jewish Community Relations Director of the Des Moines Jewish Federation. Our show this week has been brought to you by Bergman Folkers Cosmetic Surgery. Ron Bergman is a wonderful friend of mine, and I encourage you to go to bergmanfolkers.com and check out all of the wonderful work that Dr. Bergman does. Not just cosmetic stuff. Some of the work that he does is really profound. And at some point in this show, I'll have him on just to talk about some of the amazing things he does when people have injuries to their hands or other things. Anyway, many thanks to Dr. Ron Bergman for his support of the show. Mark and I were talking about the State of the Union speech and kind of the state of the world at this point. What is the role of the United States based on what we heard this week and what we see happening? And one of the paragraphs, actually two of the paragraphs in the State of the Union speech really struck me. Part of it is because Mark and I both do work with Africa, with Sudan specifically, and there was no mention of the word Africa in the speech, but the one paragraph that had to do with Africa, the one section that had to do with Africa, I wanted to share parts of with you because I think it gives you an indication of what the administration, or how the administration views its role just generally in the world. So the president said, "We also know that progress in the most impoverished parts of our world enriches us all." Okay, so let's build up Africa and South America. In many places, people live on little more than $1 a day. So the United States will join with our allies to eradicate extreme poverty in the next 2 decades by connecting more people to the global economy and empowering women by giving our young and brightest minds new opportunities to serve and helping communities to feed, power, and educate themselves, by saving the world's children from preventable deaths, and by realizing the promise of an AIDS-free generation. Can anybody disagree with that? I don't think anybody can disagree with that. We all want that. That's all wonderful stuff, but let's talk about what it means. And then we get this line. Above all, America must remain a beacon to all who seek freedom during this period of historic change.
Well, David, does that mean that the doors of immigration are open to those who seek freedom and can't find it in their homeland?
I don't think that's what it means.
What do you think it means,
I
David?
think what it means is that the president is talking about, because this came right before the stuff on the Middle East, that this goes with, we will stand with citizens as they demand our universal rights and support stable transitions to democracy. The problem is the transitions we're supporting don't do this. Let's talk about empowering women, shall we? These Islamist governments that are coming to power in Africa do anything but empower women. We're taking out the Western-style secular governments. Now, granted, they're dictatorships, and that's not a good thing. But what we need to be putting in there is a Western-style democracy, not a Western-style, not an Eastern-style theocracy. Because these Eastern-style theocracies are not empowering women; they're bringing women back 1,000 years.
So you think Obama was saying that the beacon is really an ideal to be emulated, or is it more tangible than that?
I think that is what it means. I think he's talking about being a light. This is we're an exemplar. Be like us. And I do think America needs to do that. I absolutely do. I think that the world seeing what we do is helpful. The problem is letting other people languish while we're doing that. Can we really let other people around the world suffer oppression? Do we really want women in Egypt and Sudan and other places to be raped for political gain, which we see in Sudan, which we're seeing on the streets of Egypt as the Muslim Brotherhood threatens women who come out to protest with political rape gangs? whose sole purpose is to go out there and cause emotional turmoil for women and use it as an act of terrorism to discourage women from protesting.
And we're not even talking about subjecting women to the laws of Sharia. We're talking about mob action in the streets.
Yeah, but this is politically organized mob action. We're also talking about the Taliban going out there and brutalizing women in Pakistan and Afghanistan for wanting to learn. I mean, these are not governments that are empowering women. And if we're empowering those governments or even allowing them to come to power, we are not empowering women. We're doing great harm to women around the world.
The easiest thing in that litany of ideas where we want to help the most impoverished is to contribute funding to the research and distribution of polio vaccines, for example.
There are lots of things that we can do medically. There's certainly lots of ways that we can contribute humanitarian aid to help.
Yes.
And in future shows, we'll talk about our interaction with the Sudanese community and how U.S. aid has helped and any number of other things that go in that direction.
But the implication you brought up before is that we're going to stand with people who are standing against the brutal dictatorships that they live under, and we have not done that.
We have not done that. And the question is, what can we do? I mean, this is really a difficult situation. We have ideals, but we have to figure out how to deal with the reality that the ideals don't necessarily work. Empowering women, letting people have self-determination, wanting everybody to live in a democracy, these are wonderful things. But if your choice is, do you want to live on the Western-style secular dictatorship or a theocracy that oppresses all minorities and women, I'm not sure which side everybody is going to fall on there. And yes, the people who are part of the we want the theocracy are going to say democracy, democracy, democracy. But what you're running into is a situation in which people who have been our friends, people who are going to be our friends, people who are our friends philosophically, are now finding themselves directly oppressed.
Let me point to the understanding, as Secretary of State Kerry said, now's the time to open up diplomacy with Iran. You know, America's understanding of trying to change a regime's orientation has more now to do with diplomacy and carrots and sticks.
Well, definitely, and we've gotten nowhere with diplomacy in Iran. In fact, evidently the promise that was made to Israel a while back, and I think the promise that was made to the American people by this administration is that the time for diplomacy was coming to an end, and we're talking about starting diplomacy. It's fairly clear that Iran has simply been using diplomacy as a stalling tactic. And if the thought of diplomacy will continue to give them months and months and months to develop their program, the ability to stop their program is not likely. And we move from a containment is not an option to containment is
our
reality.
Only option. The fact is, look, before Hillary Clinton left her office, she said the window of diplomacy can't be open forever. So there are some hints that there has to be a timeliness from it. But then if Kerry is saying now's the time to restart something, we don't know what that means.
Well, look, you've got to have negotiations ongoing.
Of course.
But, should we be talking to the leadership of Iran? Of course we should be talking to people of Iran. Absolutely. We should be telling them if they don't change their policies, we're going to move on. And we're going to do something that's much worse than talking about talking. The problem, if you don't negotiate with your enemies, you're not going to accomplish anything. You got to negotiate with your enemies. There just has to be a step beyond negotiating with your enemies, or the negotiations don't work.
Okay. The second part of that question is, what is it that the United States can give Iran to dissuade it from its path?
Well, or should the United States give Iran anything? Because if the United States is giving Iran something, then you're giving an incentive to other countries to do what Iran has done in order to get the incentives that the United States has offered.
That's the implication when Kerry says diplomacy is the way to solve this. Diplomacy means give and take.
Diplomacy is speak softly and carry a big stick. That is diplomacy. If you don't carry the stick, the diplomacy isn't going to get you anywhere. And the United States needs to say, look, if we are going to take action against you. We are going
well,
to.
Well, look, the line that was put out there by Obama is, "We'll take care of it." Basically, whatever line he used in the State of the Union, it'll come to us. We'll take care of it if indeed it looks like it's going to end in the ability of Iran to have the bomb.
Likewise, the leaders of Iran must recognize that now is the time for diplomatic solution because a coalition stands united in demanding that they meet their obligations, and we will do what is necessary to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon.
2 parts. We will do everything to prevent from.
Part of that.
Yes.
The second part of that, the question is, what's the timeline?
Yeah.
This gets us back to where we were a year ago, talking about whether or not Israel was going to attack Iran and what the red line was and all of these things. And I think no one's talking about it, but the only thing I can imagine is that the red line is nearing. That at this point, Iran's pushing it off by creating more fuel rods and things like that,
right,
which they can save face by doing. But as Iran extends its hands into these other countries where they're fledgling democracies and is turning them into pro-Iranian radical regimes, it's really hard for us to just let that go.
One more subtopic: Argentina.
Okay.
The Iranians are now. Hezbollah is then partnering now with the Argentinian government to examine the causes of the Amia bombing in the 90s.
Oh, sure, and I'm sure Iran and Hezbollah will find that Israel did it to itself, just to blame Iran for something. There's a lot of silliness that goes on. How the Argentinian government can act that way, I have no idea, but they certainly are.
Just to reiterate, that's, number one, it shows Iranian meddling with Latin America. It shows Iranian fingerprints all over the world with terrorism. These are all parts of an argument that still have to be made for the American people really to see what Iran is.
Well, shall we talk about the Bulgas bombing in Bulgaria, where you've got Hezbollah's fingerprints on that, killing people in Bulgaria, and the European Union doesn't want to consider Hezbollah a terrorist organization? I mean, Hezbollah has killed actually more Americans than anybody but Al-Qaeda.
That's correct. Why? Okay, obviously, the United States would encourage Bulgaria to push the EU to recognize Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Do you think that can be successful?
I think the United States is going to try to encourage the European Union to do that. I think the question is whether or not the European Union is going to be willing to declare a terrorist organization just for opposing Israel, they need to understand that the framing of the situation as of being for Israel against Israel, and this is just an against Israel and therefore there's no problem, is an idiotic way to present the issue. The world is a very dangerous place right now, and when Americans and Europeans figure out that Israel's battles are their battles, instead of this idiocy of feeling like Israel is on its own and what Israel wants and needs is not of benefit to them. That's just dumb. The reality is that the things that threaten Israel and threaten democracy and security in Israel threaten every nation in Europe and threaten the United States. And that's going to be a common theme on this show as we move forward from week to week. Every week you'll see even what goes on in Sudan affects Israel, affects Europe, affects the United States. And We'll talk about it every week as we help people understand the world. Shalom.